I'd like to open up for a round of 3 questions, reactions. And before I start, I'm going to shamelessly plug us at NAWI. We work on both theoretical analysis, but also colloquial manifestations of analysis. And one of the things, I'll come to you, one of the things that we've worked on is a little 101 on economics. And so I'll read the last bit. We will have them for distribution later. And it talks about, it talks about the economy through the language of life, is what we call it, rather than simplification. We don't want to be one of those people who just talk about how bad things are, talking about how to get free. It certainly is possible to live different, to have economic policies that work for the people and the land. We don't have to be the characters in the scary movie who keep going the wrong way. This does not have to be our destiny. So what can we do? This part is not necessarily like the movies where the bad person has to be killed or where there's one thing or person to overcome. It's more complicated than that because, like we said before, the system changed us. Also, the people who created and run the system are some mean mothers. Still, some things we can do. Recognize that it's absurd. Know that it doesn't have to be. Imagine a different way. Make it make sense. Listen to market women. Listen to the workers. Push our governments to restructure borrowing and debt in our favor. Push them to fund healthcare, to fund education, and to fund the farmers. Because they can, because poverty is created. Center life, eat in communion, share what you have. Recognize when enough is enough. Grow the food, take care of the soil, watch the bloom, harvest the goods. And then, when we get it going, when we leave it all behind, shelve this little pocketbook as a relic from another time. So I hope that inspires us to keep going. And also sometimes it's not that complicated, right? Centering ourselves, making sure that we're all living in dignity, that people are fed, people are healthy, and that we're rebalancing power dynamics, and that we're resisting this ideation that Thandika Mukindawire talked about, the Africa failure complex, that we can believe that we're able. So I'll open up for a round of 3 questions. I'm going to gender balance it. The lady at the back, I'll have the gentleman here, Jason, and then the gentleman on that side. If you can have microphones.
Thank you. Thank you, all 3 of you, for such wonderful presentations and insights. So my name's Jennifer Larby. I work for Christian Aid. I'm based in the UK. We focus a lot of our advocacy, speak up, we focus a lot of our advocacy and campaigning on debt justice in particular, and work with Afrodad as one of our key partners. We used to be in the tax justice advocacy space as well, but as people that work for INGOs know that we often spread ourselves too thin, but we are following the tax justice campaign very closely. And in our advocacy and campaigning, particularly to the UK government, we ensure that we are raising the issues around the UN Tax Convention in particular. But I did have a question about what we could be doing practically to push back against the UK government in particular, who we know don't play a particularly constructive role in many of these conversations about a UN debt workout mechanism or a UN tax convention. So any kind of practical advice, arguments, evidence that me and my colleagues could use back in the UK to the UK government to push back on the arguments that they would use to not support the UN Tax Convention and the Debt Convention. And I think this is really important because a lot of the things that we are talking about at this conference does need to have kind of resonance in, the capitals of the global north, where different organizations are, like Christian Aid and others, are really pushing the reparations and debt justice agenda. So just really would appreciate some thoughts and advice on that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chennai Prof and the whole panel for the a very insightful presentation and the comments. I just want to hear from your analysis in terms of the current digital and technology drive, and in light of the crisis that we are talking about, and with my understanding of how Africa currently is lagging behind in terms of its digital and technological dividend. How can we look at this digital and technology dividend and try and prevent a crisis in the future? We see how data now is becoming the new gold, and something that can also entrench the challenges that we are talking about now. So I just want to hear your perspectives in terms of how can we prevent the possibility of having another crisis of digital and technology in the future, within the context of reparations as well, and also of these systemic and structural injustices that we are talking about. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Good morning, everyone. Jason Braganza from Afrodat. Let me begin by thanking Professor Bokpin and his team for putting together a very exciting paper. And as Chennai said, and Crystal as well, the motivation behind calling it the Black Paper. The important thing around it was, to also bring different types of intersectional issues with regards to not just development finance, but the global economic governance structure. And as the paper continues to evolve, certainly is going to contribute to how we define in this global system that is slowly consuming itself and will very soon spit itself out in a very dangerous and disruptive way. So we hope that the Black Paper will find a position and a place on the continent to redefine our engagement in that. But I also want to appreciate what Eunice said about not trying to differentiate between climate financial architecture and the general global financial architecture. And I think these two things are very important, particularly as we try to bridge different struggles, different movements. We are witnessing in some instances a regression in some of the asks, particularly in those who are in the climate space, to things that were pushed back against nearly 20, 30 years ago. So certain things like conditionalities, things like debt-related financing instruments, things like lowering of tax regulations or creation of tax incentives to attract foreign direct investment into our continent with regards to accessing capital and finance for the climate finance or the energy transition. So the Black Paper also tries to sort of bring those two things, bring these different things together, and yes, definitely promote the idea that there is only one global financial architecture with different sort of buckets under there that we need to find a way of working together. So I just want to really commend Professor Bobkin for that, and continue, like Crystal and Chennai said, to encourage all of us to contribute feedback to this paper and embrace it as what is going to be another blueprint or an additional blueprint to what the continental agenda in the global architecture is going to look like. Thanks.
Sorry, that way. Sorry.
What? I hope you didn't take my time from that.
I did.
Thank you, Jason, and thank you very much. I mean, I must tell you that so far, what we've heard has really ignited a sort of a revolution within me, and I'm sure the delegates that have come here for the first time. Now, my question is about the Black Paper and the process. where does it sit from here? What happens from here? Because it's almost like I've already prepared something that I will be tabling in Parliament in South Africa about what I heard yesterday. And I'd like to see the only way for these to become implementable and effective in the continent is if each country that's represented here becomes advocates in your country to go into the parliament there in that country and start these black papers within parliament there. So I asked the question, what is the status? And from the presentation that was made by the first person, I just forget the name, I think the impact of that, the insights that you've given us, has to be shared in every country in Africa. Because it's not a Ghanaian problem or a Zimbabwean problem. This is an African issue. And the only way we can tackle this effectively is if we use our own governments and our own parliaments in our different countries to advocate for what we've started here. And I don't know what the process is. I heard you say something like, the paper is coming and we'll be invited. Is it like coming this afternoon, or is it coming tomorrow morning, or when? Because I want to go out and start protesting right now after what I've heard. Thanks.
Thank you. I'm going to close for that. There's a revolution starting there as a Kenyan. Come join, like we are about protest. So I will field the questions. I think the first question on what practical advice we have for folks in the UK and their governments, I think that can go to Chennai. Prof, I think the second question on the digital space and what that looks like can go to you. Jason, you spoke about intersectionality, which feminists have been doing for a long time. And Eunice, if you have anything to respond to that, I think it's an important conversation to have. All oppression is linked, and I think that has to be held central. With regards to the black paper, like we said, this is the first draft. Knowledge takes time. We're happy that the revolution flames are beginning, but knowledge takes time. So this is the first draft. We are reviewing it with a number of reviewers, making sure that it also has deep feminist roots in its intersectionality, its analysis, and its positions of the way forward. So it will take a few more months to do if we're going to do it well. But Jason, as Jason said, we invite you all, and if you are interested, please let us know, and we'll invite you to how a peer review mechanism or a review mechanism or conversations can take place. I also invite you to join APNIFT and set some flames there, the African Parliamentarians Network on Tax and Illicit Financial Flows. Chennai, who's here, can tell you more about it. There are the flames of parliamentarians working on questions, tax, debt, political economy, and I think it might be a good community for you to join. And also set some flames. As a Kenyan, my parliament is letting me down. So I'll pass on to Prof, and then Chennai and Eunice. You can sit where you are, actually.
Right, thank you very much. On digitization, the gap is wide. The gap is wide. I'm not too sure whether Africa is even playing catch-up right now, but I think that there's great potential because the world increasingly is being digitized and all of that. And because we just don't have the enablers to start with and all of that. So at the global governance level, digitization, I'm not too sure Africa is well represented, but I believe that this is something that is worth taking up so that we don't allow decades down the line before we begin to talk about how Africa is losing and all of that. But one of the things that I've been privy to be involved quite recently is about how African culture and artifacts are being digitized, right? And we are losing control. So a lot of these things have been digitized, and actually the patent and all of that sit in the global north and all of that. So the hardcore bit artifact will be here, but the digital form will be out there, and they will be trading with it and all of that. So I think these are things that Africa must begin to play a key role in there. But I'm thinking that the way we can do it is to maybe negotiate from position of strength. We have to be one on this and have, I know at African Union level, the digitization strategy and all of that, it comes down to implementation and the financing and also the timelines that we want to put in place. So there is some kind of work being done in that area. I'm not too sure where they've gotten to in that area, but I think we also need to mobilize CSOs in that space as well so that we begin to monitor that. Oftentimes, if we leave this to political actors alone, Africa doesn't get its fair share in terms of the discussion and how it is represented. So I agree with you. Thank you.
Can I go? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. First of all, thank you so much for that question, Jennifer. And for two reasons. One of the things that we've at times seen is civil society from richer countries wanting to come to Africa to do advocacy work, right? Specifically in the tax justice movement, when quite frankly, within this conversation of not just the global tax reform, but also, sort of the global financial architecture broadly, the countries that are pushing back against this, right, are the countries such as where you're from. So what we actually need is for civil society from the UK, from Western countries, to be doing that work within the countries where you are, right? Rather than coming to do capacity building with our members of parliament, etc., right? So for me, that's the first point, and thank you for raising that. And then what I would say in terms of strategy, quite frankly, you just need to keep your foot on their neck, right? It's the persistence that I think is hopefully going to get us where we need to be, calling out their hypocrisy, because the United Kingdom and its overseas dependent territories are the most responsible for the loss of resources that are flooding, that are leaving the global south. So I would say that consistently calling out, consistently collectively working together to put pressure on members of parliament, to put pressure on policymakers, I think I would say that that's the most important thing. And then maybe just very quickly, I want to echo, I think, the point that was made by the Member of Parliament from South Africa. There absolutely is a need for us to domesticate the conversations that are happening in this room. And one of the reasons for that is, whilst I talk about this great work that's happening, that's being championed by the Africa Group, when you start to get into the detail, right, we have a few countries, South Africa being one of them, that's not always at the table, right, and sort of always fully behind what the entire Africa Group is saying. And so even domestically, we need to call them to account, right, to make sure that ultimately what they're also championing at the global level aligns, right, with the collective movement of the continent. So just to say, I think in terms of the black paper, that is absolutely a process we'd love for you to join, but it's important, right, that we also be doing this work at the national level.
Thank you. Thank you for that. And thank you, Jason, for your comment. Very important thing. And I think he said it all, but the thing I would like to add to that is he mentioned the conditionalities and certain things that are being moved away from in other settings that are still happening in climate finance. And a huge example of that is when certain funds or climate finance mechanisms are set aside to specifically help African countries, and then countries apply, and then they don't have the technical expertise that qualifies them to receive the funds that is supposedly set to come to that continent. And then there are several bureaucratic structures that make it virtually impossible for these countries to access these funds. And when the funds are coming in, you're also being told what to do with the money. And sometimes those priorities or the priorities of those funds do not align with what the continent needs. Only about 28% of climate finance came towards adaptation, which is Africa's primary need, because some of the damages that have been caused by climate finance cannot be fixed at this point. But a significant portion of climate finance is going to mitigation, which again would benefit these countries who will come in here and invest in renewable energy. And again, the money is going out. So thank you, Jason, for that comment. These are some of the issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Eunice. Bureaucratic violence, I think that's a paper in and of itself. Eunice, thank you. Chinai, thank you. Prof, thank you so much. We will put out as we go updates on the black paper. Thank you so much for coming so early.